welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Hello and welcome to the Skeptic Zone, episode 281 for the 9th of March 2014. Richard Saunders coming to you today from the Royal Botanical Gardens in Sydney. What a lovely day to be wandering around the gardens. The sun is getting a little bit low over there towards the horizon. Where else? People are wandering about, the birds are singing. It's a pretty nice day. Coming up on this week's show, we catch up with Dr Besh Saab, the man who is trying to go to Mars. He's a good friend of mine. I met him about a year ago when we attended a conference in the Czech Republic. Besh is soon to enter a lock-up situation, as it were, a simulation of what it will be like to live on Mars, as a plane zooms overhead. Besh will tell us all about that, including how you can ask him a question when he's in his lock-up. Is there life on Mars? Well, hopefully soon there will be. After that, it's a week in science from our good friends at the Royal Institution of Australia, www.riaus.org.au. And then it's the return of Maynard's spooky action, and what an interesting Maynard we have for you this week. Maynard's cat went in for an operation. Now, Maynard's cat, Tinkerbell, is 19 years old. 19 years old. Maynard followed his cat into the operating theatre and interviewed the vet and the nurse during the operation. Wow, Maynard really comes up with the unusual reports. This is your chance to be a fly on the wall for Tinkerbell's operation. Then to round off the show, it's a report from Skeptics in the pub in Sydney, where we ask the big questions. And the question we asked this week is, when the Australian Vaccination Network changed their name, which they're required to do, what should they change it to? What would be a better name for the Australian Vaccination Network? I think you can guess. That's coming up at the end of the show. Now, during the course of the show, during a break in one of the stories, we're going to come up with a random number to get the winners for our Cosmos giveaway competition. So one lucky listener in Australia will win a Cosmos pack, and one lucky listener internationally. And that includes the autographed copy of the Cosmos book signed by Dr. Neil deGrasse Tyson and Anne Duran. But now it's time for me to keep sitting on this bench, in fact, enjoying a nice, lazy afternoon while you enjoy the Skeptic Zone. Me now all the way from a wonderful part of the world, Zurich in Switzerland, where it's night time. Here it's daytime. I can see the sun shining down, but where my friend Besh Saab is, it's night time. He's looking up at the moon, he's looking up at Jupiter, and more importantly, he's looking up at Mars. Hello, Besh.
Hi, Richard. How are you?
I'm doing really well, and that's true. You're actually sitting or standing in a park in Switzerland, in Zurich, looking up at Mars.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love it when Mars comes close to Earth and you can see it bright and red in the sky. It's really cool.
It's very appropriate, actually, because that's where you're hoping to head. But before you get to the real Mars itself and explore Mars, you're doing something quite interesting. You're going into a sort of a simulation environment to see what it's like to lock yourself away for a while and, well, be on another planet. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, one aspect is the personal curiosity of what it's like to be locked away in a HAB module and have a dissociation from earthly things. But another part of it is just to undertake some research that will facilitate the exploration and the settlement of Mars. And so I'm going there with another 5 individuals, whom are all strangers at this point in time to me. And we will just live inside this tuna can of a house and go outside for the maximum time of 4 hours every other day or so with a Mars suit on. And it's, we do everything we can to make it seem like we're actually on the planet, Mars itself.
And where is that located, this interesting experiment?
It's in southern Utah in a relatively high altitude desert, which happens to be colored red. Uh-huh. And so it really has a Mars-like look to it. And when if you take the time to type in Mars Desert Research Station into Google Maps, you'll really see how Mars-like it is. And it's in the middle of nowhere, and it should be rather interesting.
And how long will you be, well, for all intents and purposes, on Mars?
This is a 2-week analog mission.
That should give you a taste, I guess, a flavour for what it's like to be with a group of people and carrying on like that. And you were telling me earlier that you're going to try and really simulate being on Mars by being in a sort of a time bubble. You'll be on delay, so to speak.
That's correct. All communications back to Earth will be delayed by at least 5 minutes each way. And probably we're going to do 20 minutes because that would simulate the worst case scenario on Mars. At present, with the current distance between Mars and Earth, the delay would only be about 5 or 7 minutes or something. But we want to know what it's really like to have like what is essentially a 40-minute lag between when you send a question and when you get an answer. Sometimes those answers are important.
Yeah. That's what do I do now? And you have to wait 40 minutes for your answer. Yes, but that's exactly what the people on Mars, and hopefully you'll be one of them. That's what you'll have to deal with if you have to communicate with Earth. Sometimes it's just going to be a long telephone call.
Yep, and I think they really want to set up crews who are highly independent, can think creatively, and will be able to just carry things out more or less on their own, and who are used to doing that. It's quite a different setting than what's experienced on the International Space Station, for example, where orders are directed in on an hourly basis. And so that is a different aspect in terms of how the mission is carried out.
Right. Now, the last time we spoke to you were telling our audience about the fact that you've applied to be one of the very few people who will initially go off to Mars. How is that all progressing? I mean, it must be progressing somewhat if you're going on to this interesting experiment in the Utah desert.
Well, yeah, so the experiment in the Utah desert is with the Mars Society, which is a completely separate organization from Mars One, right, the Dutch company which intends to send people to Mars. And I applied for each of these things separately. And the Mars Society accepted me into this post as the crew biologist, and so I undertake the mission in March. And Mars One has put me forward into round 2 of their scenario, and I've had to undertake a medical exam, which I passed. And then at some point in time, I'll have to sit down with them and have an interview to see whether or not I'll pass on to round 3.
Wow. That's very exciting, and that you've made the next stage for the Mars mission is very exciting. And also, I'm pleased that you're doing what else you can in order to further your own cause to go to Mars. And I think you've recently launched a Twitter feed, huh?
Mm-hmm. So I have a Twitter that's called Red Marble. I still have not tweeted on it, but I think I might start doing that once I get to the Mars simulation site. I guess I'm sort of reluctantly entering into this realm of what is it called?
Self-promotion.
Self-promotion, that's it. Yeah. I mean, I don't mind being in the limelight at all. In fact, I love being on stage, and I love, speaking to audiences. But the self-promotion is a totally different aspect that I'm not used to, but it's something that I'll have to learn how to acquire artfully or tastefully, I hope, at least.
Well, it's the necessary evils, isn't it? Now, tell me more about what you expect it to be like when you simulate being on Mars in this little tin can, as you say. Apart from the fact that you're going to put yourself, the whole team are going to be on this self-imposed delay to simulate being on another planet. What other things might you expect to find?
Well, there's basically 3 separate things which will occupy my time while I'm there. The first is outreach and interviews and so forth. So there are many schools which are sending me video questions. A lot of them are science students that want to get an idea of what it's like to be on Mars. And then there's also this school called St. Michael's that's in Victoria. And with them, I'm embarking on an art project. And I think how this will evolve, although the details aren't certain yet, is that the students will video in questions for me. And in those questions, they will request me to take certain types of photos and to answer certain types of questions. And then what they will do is they will take all the photos and the questions that I give them, and then they will produce some sort of collage, and they can alter the photos in Photoshop and so forth to create what they believe their experience would be like if they were to go to Mars themselves. So this allows the students to really put a personal touch and to try to get creative with some other people's medium, both from the from the onset of choosing the images in the beginning and also from editing them afterwards. I don't really know how that's going to work out, but it could turn out to be really cool. And then along the same lines, we also have to do certain interviews. So there are a couple news agencies that are interested, and there's a crew journalist who is part of every mission. Uh-huh. And our crew journalist is going to be filming a short documentary that'll be aired by National Geographic. So some of the time is just spent more or less answering questions about the research that we're doing and that sort of stuff. The second thing, which will occupy probably most of my time, is the actual research that I'm doing. I'll be undertaking some logistical experiments to set up a blind crossover study. A blind crossover study is where the people who are being experimented on don't realize what they're doing, so they're either getting a placebo or they're getting a drug, for example. Right. And the crossover means that part of the time they're actually on the placebo, and part of the time they're actually on the drug. But I won't be studying a drug. I'll be studying the effects of inducing mild hyperketonemia. Now, this is when you have an elevated level of ketones in your blood, and it's something that occurs during starvation or after a very, very strenuous exercise, and it's a means of combating the deleterious effects of having hypoglycemia, which of course is low blood sugar, which obviously leads to cognitive problems and muscular fatigue. And so evolution has allowed mammals to come up with this process where we can use ketones instead of glucose, and then in the last fleeting moments of life, we have, I guess, an extra boost of energy to try to catch an animal or to do something that we need to do to survive. But in theory, we could also just consume the ketones directly. And then this might impart some sort of increase in endurance or cognitive abilities. And in fact, my collaborator in Oxford, at Oxford University in the UK, Kieran Clark, she has been studying this for about 5 years now, and that's indeed what she finds. So high-performance athletes have been taking the ketones while they're rowing, for example, and they find that they can actually row farther. And then in animal models, like a mouse, for example, which has symptoms that are similar to Alzheimer's disease, so they have cognitive deficits, they find that that giving them the ketone in their diet actually improves their cognitive functions. So you can imagine that if we have an astronaut on Mars, and let's say there's only 4 of them, right, and 2 of them have to go out to perform an extravehicular activity which involves repairing some generator or turning over the solar panels or something, and it may be dangerous, it may be difficult, and it may last a long time. It could be beneficial for them to have something that would just give them that little extra kick. And so the research that I'm setting up to do is to investigate whether or not these ketones have such a kick in an environment like this. And it's pretty exciting. Maybe I don't know if it's going to work or not, but it certainly will be what consumes most of my time while I'm there.
I was just about to say, it's just this sort of research on these interesting little tangents that can lead to all sorts of discoveries down the track that we can't even envisage.
That's part of the reason why I went into science and research in the first place. It's just you never know where it's going to lead. I mean, for me, the most interesting things that I've ever discovered, when I was doing my PhD or doing my postdoc, were things that were just completely by accident, or rather completely unpredicted. It was just something where I was like, that's funny. And then you sort of think about it for a little bit. And sometimes you can think about it for a year before you really understand, what this funniness is. And then once you have a few ideas, you design a few more experiments to test whether or not your hypothesis might be correct. And sometimes you're wrong. You go to a new area. Sometimes you're right. And then you realize, okay, I mean, this is something which is totally unexpected, but it appears to be true.
I think to myself that one of the phrases that will probably be very appropriate for people living on Mars eventually is necessity is the mother of invention. I can just imagine that all sorts of situations will crop up which we can't foresee, which will necessitate people like you coming up with solutions and discoveries and inventions.
That's exactly right. I mean, that's challenge is what makes us grow, and I think there will be a lot of innovation coming from planet Mars in the not so distant future.
Now, can you tell me a little bit more about what your living conditions will be like initially in the desert, in the Utah desert? How big is your environment? Do you have personal space? What's the eating facilities like? How much do you know?
Well, yeah, I don't know every last detail, but there's a 2-floor hab module, which has on the top floor there has like sort of a common space, which is, smaller than your average North American or Australian living room for sure. So quite cramped. And then also on that same floor there are 6 bedrooms. Now the entire size of a bedroom is probably smaller than a single bed. So what you have is just like a tiny cot, and then maybe a foot or less or half a meter or something between the edge of the bed and the wall, and then above the bed you have some shelves, and that's it. That's your space. Like it's really it's like one of these capsule hotels in Japan. It's actually not quite as cramped as that, but it's pretty small, and that's the entirety of your personal space. But there is a door, so you do have some privacy, and there is a bed, and you can sleep. Being on Mars is not like being on the space station where you just sort of float around, and you can actually have a room. You can have a bedroom, so that's kind of cool.
And of course, the gravity is a little less than Earth, so you'll be able to leap tall buildings in a single bound, maybe.
I'm really curious to see what that will feel like, because the gravity would be, I think it's 38% of what it is on Earth, and you really should be able to jump quite high or throw a ball quite far. Yeah. So the third thing that that I'll be spending time on is I'm going to try to record a music video while I'm there.
Oh wow.
And so Chris Hadfield, when he was on the International Space Station, did a cover of David Bowie. Yeah. And I want to do a cover of a different David Bowie song. And if I can pull it off, and if I like the product in the end, then we'll make it available online for people to see. But only if I think it's good. But we'll put some effort into that, and it should be fun.
I guess the one can't go past the song of David Bowie live on Mars. That would be the appropriate one I would imagine. Now, something very interesting we're going to attempt to do for our listeners, Besh, is to have you answer their questions. Now, a little bit later on down the track, I'll be announcing details. But basically, what we want people to do now is start thinking of questions they can send you while you're away on this mission in the desert, simulating Mars. They can send you questions, and we're going to figure out how you can answer them, probably back to me via the Skeptic Zone.
Sounds great.
So there you are, people. Think of your questions. What do you eat in this environment? Do you get on with the people? Do you want to run outside? Have you had enough? All these sort of questions you can ask Besh. Now, when are you actually going into this simulation?
I leave Zurich on Friday the 14th, and I arrive there on the 15th into the simulation, and then it lasts for 2 weeks, so till the 30th. Wow!
So that's very soon now. I think we'll probably even try to arrange something on the next show where I'll give the listeners details on how they can send questions to you. Besh, it's the next step in your hopeful giant leap towards Mars. I wish you all the best. I'm very excited. It sounds like it's going to be such a fascinating opportunity, even going into this simulation.
Yeah, I'm really excited. It should be fun.
Well, enjoy your Zurich night. Have a gaze up at Mars for me. It's bright sunshine here, so I can't quite see it just at the moment. And until we contact you next time in your simulation, all the best, Besh.
Thank you, Richard.
Hey, this is Jay Novella from the Skeptics Guide to the Universe podcast. Did you know that there are thousands of skeptical reports, interviews, and investigations going back to 1981, free to download? Just visit www.skeptics.com.au. Click the publications link and enjoy almost every back issue of The Skeptic, the journal from Australian skeptics. You can also subscribe online and get the latest digital or hard copy of this, the world's second oldest skeptical magazine. That's www.skeptics.com.au or just Google Australian Skeptics.
Welcome to A Week in Science from RiAus, bringing you the science you need to know. You may have heard that the Antarctic sea ice is expanding, but the world is warming. Doesn't make sense until you know the facts. In 2013, the maximum wintertime extent of the Antarctic sea ice was an all-time record at 19.47 million square kilometres, almost 1.5 times the size of the Antarctic continent. Sea ice is a thin layer of ice, typically 1 to 2 metres thick, that forms on the surface of the ocean when the water has been cooled enough by the atmosphere. Once formed, sea ice can move around, pushed by winds and currents, and continues to grow by further freezing and collision with other sea ice. When the atmosphere and the oceans warm again in the spring, or when the sea ice has moved towards the equator, it begins to melt. In the Northern Hemisphere, the Arctic sea ice has been declining over the last few decades as the atmosphere has warmed. A recent paper has found that the amount of energy radiated back into space is the dominant reason why the Arctic is warming much faster than the Earth's average. But the extent of Antarctic sea ice has been steadily increasing as the planet gets warmer. The difference is that in the south, there is a frozen continent delivering cold air to the surrounding seas, while Arctic sea ice forms over open water. And the huge net increase in area of the Antarctic sea ice masks strong regional declines in sea ice volume around the continent. And now, 4 fast facts that may contribute to the expanding Antarctic sea ice. Increased westerly winds around the Southern Ocean, driven by climate change and ozone depletion, could be driving sea ice northward. More rain and snow, other effects of climate change, could be layering the Southern Ocean with a cool, dense layer on top. Rain and snow could also be freshening the surface waters and thus increasing the local freezing point for sea ice formation. And increasing melting of the Antarctic continental ice is producing more icebergs that will contribute to sea ice formation. That's it for this A Week in Science. For more information on Antarctic sea ice, go to the RiAus website, riaus.org.au, follow us on Twitter at RiAus, and like us on Facebook. My name's Paul Willis, and I'll catch you back here next week.
Hi, I'm Finn. And I'm Rebecca, and we're the Skepticons. Skepticons is an Irish podcast by the Dublin Skeptics Society. It takes a conversational, irreverent look at science, news and skeptical topics from an Irish perspective. You can find us at www.theskepticons.com. You'll always spirit with your strong finance.
Here's Maynard's spooky action at a distance.
Welcome to Maynard's Spooky Action at a Distance. Today, something very different from me. Our beloved cat Tinkerbell, otherwise known as Tinker, has had an ulcer on her left eye that Drops wasn't able to solve. So I'm going to the Merriweather vet today and taking Tinker along. My dad and mum are quite nervous about the whole thing. The cat is 19 years old, which is pretty old. I think if that was a person, that'd be 3 million. She's not too happy about the whole thing, and she's being put in what they call the cranky cat cage because she's needing a bit of sedation that's not the same as a regular sedation because she's old and the heart could have problems. And we're going to see how we go, and I'll be back at the end of it to tell you how she's getting on. Brave Tinker. I'm just inside what you'd call the operating room here, and we've got Chris here. Good afternoon, Chris.
Good afternoon, how are you?
I'm fine. A bit nervous because we've got a 19-year-old cat that's about to undergo a bit of minor surgery here, but this is what I was described as the cranky cat cage. It's good for cats that are a bit cranky.
Yes, it's also a safe form of induction of an old cat because you don't have to use other more powerful anaesthetic agents that could compromise the cardiovascular system.
And you've got the standard vet's cat that keeps wanting to get into the cage. Is that just because cats like getting into boxes? So because this is an obvious box, this cat that lives here wants to hop in there?
I think that's Oreo. Yes, he just likes getting into every box in this clinic.
As a layman in the veterinary surgeon's surgery, it's all a bit spooky. Don't know what any of this stuff is. It looks a bit like a human's surgery, except maybe not as clean, and the devices are a lot smaller. Now, that would be Tinkerbell there?
Yep, this is Tinkerbell. Here you go, Tink.
Okay. Now, that you put her in there, and I'll just have a look at her. Now, what normally happens is she just sort of dozes off, or it makes her a bit groggy?
It will cause her to become groggy initially, just prior to the point where she's able to be taken out of the cage and intubated with a tube down her trachea so we can connect through a gaseous anaesthetic machine. She may become a little bit disorientated, and her limbs might be in some strange positions, and at that point of the time she'll be quite deeply sedated, so it's not going to distress her in any way.
And the reason we're doing this is because of her age. Any other sort of anaesthetic would be dangerous because of the heart of the cat, is it?
Well, in part, but the other way to anaesthetise her would be to put a mask over her face, but she's a cranky old girl and she won't probably cope with that. Another possibility is by putting a catheter into one of the veins in her arms and then giving her an intravenous induction agent. Mm-hmm. But again, because she's a cranky old girl, she probably won't tolerate that. So this is a much safer and better agent for an old cat who's cranky and old and has possibly a fragile cardiovascular system. Okay. And it keeps us safe as well.
Yes.
And about 5 minutes for this to happen.
And the operation she's having is relatively minor. You're just using a cotton bud to scrape a little bit of an ulcer that she has on her eyeball. But if she was awake, she wouldn't be putting up for that.
No, we could. In a less cranky cat, we could probably do the procedure with local anaesthetic and sedation or even just gentle restraint, but in her case it's going to require general anaesthetic to do. And the procedure is actually use a grid keratotomy, which is producing a number of small linear cuts in a crosshatch pattern on the surface of the cornea over the ulcer once it's been debrided with a cotton bud. And It takes a little bit of deft work and concentration, and I usually have to use a magnifying loupe to do it properly, and that's a bit hard to do on a cranky old girl who doesn't want to be held.
I'll make sure I stay out of your way. It's a little bit disturbing to the layman seeing a cat go to sleep like that, but I guess you do this kind of every day, don't you?
Oh, yes, and certainly if you're not used to seeing how a cat or any animal transgresses through the various planes of anaesthesia, it could be a little bit distressing, but one has to realise that this is a humane and very standard procedure that works very well, and in many cases it's very safe.
And what's the actual gas you're using, the anaesthetic gas? Is it one that's used for humans in a lesser amount, or is it specifically for...
It's called isoflurane.
Isoflurane?
Yeah. And it's mixed with just 100% oxygen.
And today's surgery day, how many animals have you been working on today?
Oh, well, we've had major abdominal surgery on a dog this morning. We're doing this procedure now. We've got
X-rays of a bladder.
X-rays of a bladder, an ultrasound of a bladder to do after that. I've just finished doing a 2-hour neurological examination on a dog with back pain, so it's been an interesting day.
Mm-hmm.
And is this the same procedure as you would when you're putting an animal down? You said you use this procedure or not?
Well, if it was a cranky old girl and venous access was difficult for the same reasons I've previously described, then certainly this is an excellent way of getting to a point where you can get a venous access to do that sort of procedure as well. I think we might be right, Catherine. Pussycat to a point where we can then transfer it from the cage and place a mask and give it the same anaesthetic gas that we gave it in the chamber via a mask.
And I see you've got your hand on a heart there, so she can see how she's going. How's the heart going? Is it exactly what it's supposed to be doing?
Breathing very nicely, and it's all doing very well at this stage. Sorry. So what we're going to do now is we're going to open her mouth and put some local anaesthetic on her trachea, which desensitised it and therefore her larynx, and allows us to place a tube down her trachea.
What point are we at here?
Well, we're at the point now where we have our cat fully anaesthetised, and we're going to get our surgical gear ready and do the small operation now. So just let me get some gear.
And how many years have you been a veterinarian nurse?
5 years. Been in training, trained for 2 years, but been out of training for 5 years. Okay. So 7 years altogether.
So you've seen a few cranky cats in your time?
Yes, I have. I own one, actually, unfortunately.
Yes. Worst injury you've received at work or at home from a cat?
I haven't been bitten as of yet, but, can't say that yet. I have been scratched pretty bad, where I haven't had to go to hospital or anything, but had to get, antibiotic cream for it, but that's about it. Okay. I've been very lucky.
So I imagine this operation's pretty run-of-the-mill today, this one?
Yeah. Chris does this procedure pretty often, actually.
Okay. Now, actually, what normally makes a cat get an ulcer in the eye? Is it an infection or some sort of physical impact?
Physical injury. Okay. Sometimes it can be caused by an eyelid that rubs in the eye, as you elucidated. Sometimes an infection can do it, but that's unusual. Some animals can have decreased tear production, which can make their cornea prone to drying out and secondary corneal ulcers.
Okay. So is it more prone to happen in older animals?
No, not necessarily. In the case of this cat, we don't know the cause, but by the shape of the ulcer and its sudden onset, we presume it was some form of trauma. Okay. Usually cats, walk through bushes and backyards and bump into things, or they're in a cat fight with another cat or get scratched.
Well, this cat's an indoor cat, so it's probably bumped into something inside the house. As the assistant in this procedure, what are you looking out for the whole time while Chris is doing his surgery work?
I'm monitoring the depth of the anaesthetic, so our job is to not only assist Chris in getting instruments or anything he needs, but we also monitor the anaesthetic itself, so we record every 10 minutes the stats of the animal, which includes the oxygen saturation, the breathing, and the heart rate. And so if any of that changes or we are concerned, we let Chris know first. We then take steps to find out why it's changed. Mm. Sometimes it's just a probe or a cord's malfunctioned, or it needs to be repositioned in some way that we do first. But mainly we make sure the animal stays anaesthetised. Okay.
And since I won't interrupt Chris here, can you explain what he's doing there?
So now he is grabbing the third eyelid because it's in the way. Animals have a third eyelid, which when they're anaesthetised, they can't pull it back because it's like a muscle. So Chris has now pulled it back and he's actually staining the ulcer on the eye so he can actually see where it is before he then starts the procedure.
And then he puts some abrasion around where it is with a cotton. Is that what he's doing?
Yeah, so he then gets a cotton tip and gets rid of all the rough edges, and then he will get a fine needle, and that's when he draws the grids on the ulcer.
And the grid actually makes it easier for the cat's natural eyelid, eyeball coating, cornea, what's it called?
Yeah, the cornea to heal properly, yeah.
You can see the ulcer there. You see that little green area?
Oh, yes.
In the centre of the cornea.
Okay. Now, is that a fairly standard ulcer, large, small?
It's a small one.
Okay. Yes. Now, what?
I've actually debrided the redundant epithelium around the ulcer edge, and see how much bigger it is?
Oh, so it's a lot bigger than we thought.
Oh, yes, much bigger. And this is often the case when you first stain them. They appear much smaller than they actually are, and one of the clues you get is that they don't heal by normal topical treatment.
Yeah.
I'll just move my head a little bit closer, thank you.
So does the larger size of the ulcer than you thought point to it being a particular kind of cause?
Well, it has a geographic sort of shape which might suggest involvement of a feline herpes virus, but it could just be due to trauma and it's just spread. It's difficult to make a diagnosis. It's clear cut in this stage. So what we're going to have to do, Catherine, is put the lid down. Because she's old, she hasn't got much periorbital fat, so her eye is sort of pushed back into her skull, which makes access to this ulcer challenging. I think I've got most of that redundant epithelium. Yeah. And so you can see how I could not have done this in a conscious cat.
No. Right, so we've finished the procedure here. Chris, yes. Where are we up to? What did you just do?
We scarified the surface of the cornea with this edge of a 25 gauge needle in a grid pattern. And that's basically the procedure. It's very simple, and hopefully that'll stimulate corneal regrowth of the epithelium, and the ulcer will heal.
Okay. So that's it. And now what's the reverse procedure for bringing the cat out of anaesthetic?
Well, we basically turn the gaseous anaesthetic off and maintain the cat on oxygen for a period of about 4 or 5 minutes and watch their oxygen saturation. Once that remains stable, then we disconnect the cat from the anaesthetic machine, making sure that it can maintain its oxygenation without 100% oxygen, but just on room air. And if all goes well, the cat will start to wake up gradually over the next 4 or 5 minutes, and we'll extubate it. We'll put it back in its cage.
Okay. And will the cat be feeling groggy or strange for a few hours? What do cats normally do when they come out of anaesthetic?
I confess, they never tell me when I ask them. But this cat was pre-medicated with sedative, so will be sedated probably for another 4 to 6 hours, probably longer for an older cat because they metabolise these things slower and their brains are more affected by them. So the cat will be pretty snoozy for 4 or 5 hours, but hopefully by about 5 o'clock this afternoon we'll be up and sitting up and walking around enough to be able to go home.
Cool. So was that a pretty, for that procedure, has that been a pretty run-of-the-mill what you expected there, or was the ulcer a little bit bigger than what you thought?
A little bit bigger than I had expected, and took a little extra time to do, but... Yeah.
And now does one operation like this normally get an ulcer of that size?
Usually, most of the time, we only need to do it once. I've had the occasional case where we have to do it twice. Most of the time, this solves the problem. So we'll keep our fingers crossed.
Well, Catherine, I'll let you to wrap up. I'll get out of the way now while you are getting Tinker back to normal here. Now, you're keeping Tinker warm with a little bit. It looks like an Egyptian cotton towel blanket there.
Yeah, it does. It's just an old towel that we have quite a few of them in the cupboard in the laundry. We just have a heat mat to keep the body temperature warm and a towel, and we take the temperature before we wake them up, and her temperature was a little bit under normal, but not under enough that we need to worry. So,
okay. Look, I'll get out of your way and let the post-operative procedure begin here. What exactly is your role now?
My role now is to wake the cat up and extubate, take the tube out, and just monitor it until it's sitting up.
Great. Well, thank you for your work today.
Thank you.
And see you later, Tinker. And that was Tinker's adventure at the vet. And let me tell you, as a layman that hasn't seen any surgery, human or animal, it was a little bit distressing to see an animal in that state, but that's the way surgery goes. And I'm sure she's going to be fine, as she is already. It's 4 days later after the surgery, and she is healthy enough that she's getting really cranky again. Like, it's really hard to put her drops in the eyes, and she's just kind of had enough of that. So her strength's coming back. She's eating, weeing, pooing, walking, doing all the things you expect a 19-year-old cat to do. Unfortunately, her ability to play the piano is somewhat limited, but she couldn't play it in the first place, so that's okay. And I want to thank everybody that has put lovely comments on Facebook page and has contacted me and wished Tinker well, and my mum and dad. Thank you all from the bottom of their Tinkerbell heart. Oh, yeah, Tinker said, meow.
And the cosmos is yours. Now, come with me.
Well, this isn't Skeptics in the Pub, it's the Friend in Hand Pub at Glebe. I'm here with Kate Allway. Hello, Kate.
Hi.
I'm going to ask Kate to give me a hand here deciding the winner of our competition for the Cosmos Pack. What I have is I have a trusty, and you can confirm this, and everybody around the table can confirm this. We have a 10-sided die here.
Yes.
I'll get you to roll it 9 times. And each time we'll have a look at the number, write it down, and those 9 numbers will make up the random number, and then we'll know who wins the competition. So, are you ready?
I'm ready.
So remember, we're going to get a random number which is between 1 and 1,000 million by doing this. Here we go. The first number is
2.
2. Second number is
9.
9.
8.
8.
4.
4.
2.
2.
1.
1. 3 more to go.
1.
1.
7.
7.
7.
7. So the number is 298,421,177. Thank you, Kate.
Welcome.
All that's left for me to do now is to contact the 2 people who had the number closest to the random number chosen by the dice. And I hope to contact those people this week, and I'll announce those names on the next show.
There's a big weekend coming up at the beginning of April. If you're in Newcastle or if you're in Sydney, on the 5th and 6th of April, there's something to do that's Maynard related. On Saturday, the 5th of April, during the day at the Newcastle Town Hall, I'll be having an in-conversation with none other than Mr. Tim Ferguson, talking about Doug Anthony All-Stars and talking about his writing career. His latest book, Carry a Big Stick, we've spoken about. You can have a listen to the podcast. That's back there in the stream. I'll be having a chat with Tim on stage for about 15, 20 minutes, and I'm going to throw open the floor to questions for Tim Ferguson from you, the audience, for the rest of the hour. So there's going to be 40 minutes of your questions and 20 minutes of me chatting to Tim. That's what that's got planned. There's a cost involved with that, but go to the Newcastle Writers Festival website, and it's in the Newcastle Town Hall on the afternoon of Saturday, the 5th of April. Beep, 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 beep. And on the afternoon of Sunday, the 6th of April, from 3 till 6 p.m, we're having a Mad Club reunion. That's right. I'm going to be going stupid and playing some records, and Jeff the shopkeeper will be there from the Mad Club playing for a little while for 3 hours only, between 3 and 6 in the afternoon, upstairs at the Record Crate in Glebe Point Road. That's just opposite Bad Manners Cafe, if you've ever been there. If you haven't, look it up and come along. I'd say the room's only got a capacity of about 50 or 60, so come one, come all. But let me assure you, everyone that comes will be just that little bit disappointed. I'll see you there then.
Well, I'm here at Sydney Skeptics in the pub. Yes, it's that time come around again. And tonight's question is an interesting one. Given that the Australian Vaccination Network have to change their name, and they're going to do it, what should they change their name to? Josh?
I don't know. It depends. How awful do you want the name?
G-rated awful.
Oh, jeez. The asylum seeker.
Ratbag, what do you think the Australian Vaccination Network should be called now?
I've got an extremely offensive abbreviation for them, which I won't put to air. I mean, I will, but we can go on and just cut it out later. I've been wanting them to change their name since 1999.
Yeah.
They were, in fact, the impetus for me to start the Millennium Project. I found they changed their name from the Vaccination Awareness Network to Australian Vaccination Network. I decided that this was enough. People needed to be insulted, and they were top of the list. I don't think that they can really come up with a suitable name, because they've really been told they've got to say it's anti-vaccination.
It's interesting, isn't it? I mean, if they were truthful, they would just simply call themselves the Australian Anti-Vaccination Network, wouldn't they?
But they don't want to do that.
They don't want to do that.
No. They want to keep pretending. It's like the one in America, equivalent one, the National Vaccine Information Centre.
Yeah.
But the only information you can get from them is how dreadfully bad vaccines are, and generally they lie about that as well.
Yeah.
So I don't know what they're going to change their name to. Maybe, though, I mean, I'd have to talk to a lawyer about this. In fact, they could probably unincorporate and use any name they like. And that's what I think. If they if they gave up the charities, gave up the incorporation, they could really call themselves whatever they liked. And I hope nobody's told them that. Don't tell them that.
Don't send that to them. Don't give them any clues. Tim Mendham, editor of the wonderful Skeptic magazine, which I think is out soon. Is that right, Tim?
Out next week, should be.
Next week. And what can listeners and readers look forward to in the next issue of the Skeptic magazine?
Oh, quite a lot. Actually, we've got quite a big feature, actually, on religious people's exemption from looking after their kids.
Oh, like blood transfusions?
Blood transfusions, vaccinations. We've got a rather horrifying article from the US, actually, about someone who starved their child to death because they didn't say amen.
Well, we can't say amen to that,
No, absolutely not. We've got various other things. We've got a lot about Simon Singh, who was out here recently, about his issues with the law again, and of course his interest in mathematics. Good. We've got and the secret history of dolphins.
The secret history of dolphins?
Yeah, which sort of will give you a purpose in life.
Now, we want people to subscribe to the magazine too. And you can subscribe by visiting www.skeptics.com.au. But if the Australian Vaccination Network, or try to say when they change their name, what do you think that they should call themselves?
Coles.
Coles? Coles?
Well, why not? Yeah, might as well. It's as honest as the AVN is.
Thank you, Tim. Here with some more people. It's Jessica. Hello, Jessica.
Hey, Richard. How are you?
I'm really well. And tonight's question is: since the Australian Vaccination Network are changing their name by law, they have to. What do you think they should be called?
Honestly, they should be called the Anti-Vaccination Network, because that's what they are.
That's what they are. But can you think of a more comical, insulting thing?
A more comical, insulting thing?
I suggested something very rude, but I don't think we could use that. Tim Mendham suggested they should be called Coles, because it's just as honest as the Australian Vaccination Network.
Yeah, that's a possibility.
the vaccine deniers organisation or something like that?
No, I mean, I just like to keep it short and honest. Anti-vaccination movement. That's short and honest.
It is. I think
honest.
It's, and then we could actually, oddly enough, we would then support that name, wouldn't we? We would say, we support the anti-vaccination network in their new name.
We would. We would, because it's honest and it's accurate.
What a strange state of affairs that would be.
Well, we wouldn't know what to do with ourselves, would we?
We could all go home.
Well, no, we couldn't go home because
there's more people.
There's, yes. And you know, if they renamed themselves the anti-vaccination movement, then we'd still be doing our work against the anti-vaccination movement.
Regardless, that's right. Not to mention other things like homeopathy.
Homeopathy, chiropractors, all our very good friends in the alternative healthcare industry.
Thank you, Jessica.
Most welcome.
Now, the Australian Vaccination Network have been required by law to change their name, and they're looking for a new name. What do you think they should call themselves?
Crapola Inc.
I see. Have you got any ideas?
I've had time to think of this, and I'm too fickle. You're going to have to come back to me on that one for a good answer, I think.
That's a long name. I'm sure they could call themselves that.
They can have it. I think they can have that one.
It's good to see you here at Skeptics in the Pub. It's a great turnout tonight. The room is filling up nicely towards the back, and we have a talk tonight about Bitcoin.
Oh, okay. That's interesting. It's an interesting concept, actually.
Rat Bag is going to be giving that talk. And tonight, we're giving away a Cosmos pack to one lucky person who's here, which includes a Cosmos carry bag, a Cosmos book, a Cosmos notepad, and some other bits and pieces from the National Geographic Channel. So you're all in the running for that.
Why are we all in the running for that?
Because you're here.
Aha, okay.
So one of the perks of coming to Skeptics in the Pub, you get random giveaways, you see.
Great.
I wish I could describe the excitement on their faces, listeners. They're just almost falling off their chairs with anticipation. Anyway, enjoy the rest of the night.
Thank you, Richard.
It's Kathy Marks, and she won the Cosmos prize pack tonight. Congratulations.
I'm just stoked. Stoked, mate. Just stoked.
It's actually the bag, the Cosmos bag is a great shopping bag, I found.
I like that bag. That's why I was hoping to win it.
There you go.
Apart from just sort of trying to be counterintuitive.
It was the heads and tails, and you're the only one who got the last one.
I just can't do it because otherwise it's going to be agony and we're going to go on forever. So I needed that to sort of break the tedium, actually.
Well, tonight's question... Good heavens, I don't know what's going on around the corner. Tonight's question is, the Australian Vaccination Network have been ordered to change their name.
Yes.
What do you think they should call themselves? I know it's not easy, is it?
The Australian Anti-Vaccination Network?
That's the general feeling.
Yeah.
Because not only is that truthful...
Yes.
It's...
devastating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
that's all you need.
And that's what they are.
And it also is the complete inverse of what they're trying to do, which is to say we're all about vaccinations, but actually they're all about anti-vaccinations.
So if they could call themselves that, I was saying before, oddly, we would be in the position of saying we support that.
Because they're still... yeah, absolutely. No, seriously, because they're still fumbling around for a name, aren't they? A new name.
They are. And, I think they should be honest about it. I mean, we're the Australian Skeptic. We're completely honest. We are sceptical of things.
Yeah, why? If they're so sure that vaccinations are a load of bollocks, why don't they call themselves the Anti-Vaccination Network? Would be my feeling.
Good question, Kathy. Good question. Anyway, congratulations again for winning the Cosmos pack.
Oh, I'm just, yes, really.
I've thought of a name for the Anti-Vax Network, finally. If I Only Had a Brain.
That's a good one. That might be in the same category as the sort of the Australian Charlatans Network, though.
Well, the people you meet here. Hello. Who do we have here?
Hi, my name's Dan. Dan Green. I'm from the Seattle Skeptics in the Pub. Came here to check out your organization here.
And I hope you're impressed.
Oh, yeah. Very impressed. You've got a good, beautiful location. Interesting speaker.
Yeah, well, we have a new speaker every month. It's a nice pub. It's quite cosy. It's a bit warm tonight because it's the middle of summer, of course. Well, the end of summer, but it's quite warm. But we normally have a really good turnout of the Sydney Skeptics in the pub. What's the situation like in Seattle?
Well, seems like we have maybe 30 to 40 people approximately every month is probably about right. And similar kind of thing. We just have a screen set up and somebody comes in and gives a talk. Sometimes they're non-skeptical people that come in and talk about naturopathy or whatever, and sometimes they're science-oriented folks.
That's interesting because we have a range of speakers, but it's not necessarily on a skeptical issue here. Let's move around the corner. Very noisy here at the bar. We're right at the bar, ladies and gentlemen, where they're clattering glasses, and we'll just move to this corner. We try to have a range of speakers, not necessarily skeptical, but just something that we think people would be interested in.
Exactly. That's the same kind of thing. Maybe a science topic. We might have an astronomer come in and talk about some recent discoveries or whatever.
Yeah, because I think at heart skeptics are very interested in latest scientific breakthroughs and endeavors and things like that.
Yeah. And especially things that are a little brand new and breaking, and we're not really sure if they're true or not, and, skeptical science.
So what brings you to Sydney, anyway?
Well, I had a short stage play in the Short and Sweet Theater Festival.
Really?
Yeah, just a 10-minute play.
Yeah.
And when they accepted it, I thought, it's summertime down there, and maybe I better go. So I had plenty of vacation time, so I came down and watched my play the second day I was here, and I've been a tourist ever since.
Excellent.
Going back in a couple of days.
Yeah. Seattle, I've never made it up as far as Seattle. I've been to Oregon, but I've never been to Washington State.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that the only thing I really know of Seattle is by watching Frasier.
Which wasn't in Seattle. They just used a picture in the background.
Oh, really? Oh, well, of course. It was filmed in L.A., of course.
Yeah. So, I've never seen that show, so I couldn't tell you if it was realistic with Seattle or not. But if you do come, make it in July or in August when it's when it's not when it's not gray.
Gray.
Yeah. Otherwise,
because for some reason, some time ago, I took the time to look at Seattle on Google Earth, and there's an awful lot of water around, isn't it?
Yes.
A lot of people commute via ferries and things like that, I understand.
Some people do. Yeah. Probably not as much as here in Sydney. You've got a lot of water here.
A lot, yeah.
Yeah,
we certainly do.
It's Seattle's kind of a smaller scale, but similar thing, with beautiful, gorgeous mountains and
Of course.
Yeah,
of course. That part of the country has beautiful scenery, and you're very close to British Columbia.
Yes, we're not far from Vancouver.
Yeah,
a couple-hour drive up to Vancouver, which is a wonderful city.
It is. I was in Vancouver 2007 to catch an amazing cruise with James Randi up to Alaska, which was unforgettable. Yeah. Well, you live in a great part of the world. What can I say? And do the Skeptics in the Pub have a website in Seattle?
We have a meetup site.
Excellent. Yeah.
That's it. The meetup site.
Well, Seattle people. There's the clue.
If you go to meetups and search on Seattle Skeptics, yes, you'll find our monthly meetup.
I'm often on that coast of the United States. I don't make it up that far north very often at all, but if I ever come to Seattle, I will be absolutely sure to let everybody know and come to Skeptics in the Pub.
We'd love to know. Oh boy, we'd love to have you. You'd be a celebrity.
Well, there you are. Seattle people send money now. There we go. Well, look, it was really great that you came along and made the effort to come along to Skeptics in the Pub. Thank you.
You're welcome. I love being here.
Great. The Australian Vaccination Network have been ordered to change their name because their name is misleading and incorrect. What do you think they should be called? She's laughing.
Oh, I'd be very boring and say something like the Australian Anti-Vaccination Network.
That's what everybody says. But it's the best choice. It's honest, it's straightforward,
Yeah, I think so. But they'll hate that.
Oh, yes. I don't think they'll call themselves that.
No, what do you think they'll actually do?
I think they will try to use the word skeptic.
Oh, Oh, no.
Oh, yes.
Oh, just like the climate change deniers. That's terrible.
Anyway, whatever they want to do, we'll see, and I guess we'll just keep going with what we're doing.
But hey, it was a great win for us.
Of course it was.
Yeah. Yes. And we can, we can be grateful for that, and we can be particularly grateful to all the people who worked so hard on making that happen.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a good effort, and in the pages of history, there'll be a silly footnote.
Oh, I hope so.
They should have told themselves what they really are. Evidence-denying hippies.
Well, there's a new one. The evidence-denying hippies. I'll ask Joe Alabaster. It's Joe Alabaster, who listeners will well remember from the Skeptic Zone. Hello, Joe.
Hello.
That voice. Let's step over to the quiet area because it's very noisy in this part of the pub. Through the door here. Oh, that's much better. It's an interesting pub here, Sydney Skeptics in the pub. That's better, Joe Alabaster. Now, the question tonight, and I'm very glad that you came along, the Australian Vaccination Network have been ordered to change their name. She's laughing already. What do you think they should be called?
I've been going with the Australian Biohazard Advocacy Network.
Ooh, that's a new one.
But yeah, I've been keeping up with the lists. Dan Buzzard's been keeping some fantastic lists. Some of them I wouldn't necessarily seriously recommend, but I'm actually endorsing biohazards. Yep.
Right, I haven't heard that one tonight. That's new. Most people are saying they simply should be called the Australian Anti-Vaccination Network.
It would save them changing their stationery. Yep, they could keep their acronym.
They could.
And we know how Meryl is very low on money very often, as she seems to say.
Well, thank you, Joe Alabaster, and I look forward to your next appearance on the Skeptic Zone.
Excellent. I've actually got a bit of a hint, or a tip.
Oh.
If anybody would be interested. Occasionally when I'm engaging with people who are on the fence about vaccination or have been interacting with people who are anti-vaccination, I tend to get a little bit down. And one of the things that I do to sort of boost my spirits a bit is actually go to UNICEF's website and purchase some vaccinations, polio or measles.
What a good idea.
Yeah, it's sort of a tangible, it's a definite way to actually be doing something actively helping that I can measure and know that, is useful. So,
in fact, that's such a good idea. I'll include a link on the show notes. But if people just want to go there now, what do they do?
They go to unicef.org.au, and there is a section, I think it may be called Gifts. I'm not sure. It could be under the shop. I can't remember off the top of my head because I've actually got it bookmarked. Use it slightly often.
I'm sure if people Google UNICEF and vaccination, they should be able to find the right place.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Joe Alabaster, what a great tip. What a great suggestion. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Skeptic Zone, and congratulations to the two lucky winners of the Cosmos Pack. Don't forget, listeners in Sydney, if you come along to the next Skeptics dinner on the 29th of March, details at www.skeptics.com.au, you too can have the chance to win a Cosmos prize pack. Coming up on next week's show, we're going to be talking to Daniel Loxton about a new book he's written for kids all about plesiosaurs. But for now, this is Richard Saunders signing off from the Royal Botanical Gardens in Sydney, Australia.
You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone. Visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for comments, contacts, and extra video reports.